Well, I was just saying that I was worried that I'll have nothing left to say after Dan and Nico had spoken, and I fear that is that is slightly going to be the truth. But maybe I'll start from a slightly different direction. I think that one of the problems in talking about this is that misinformation and disinformation are really unhelpful categories, and words that we should avoid using, really, because to talk about misinformation and disinformation, which sometimes are divided according to, is this, are you just mistaken? Are you mistakenly sharing something that isn't true? Or are you deliberately spreading something that's untrue? Presupposes that there is an unproblematic category called information, which is neutral, which is certain, and which comes with no assumptions or agenda. And I think anyone with the slightest ounce of not even media literacy, but like experience of human communication knows that that's a very, very rare thing. So for that reason, I think misinformation and disinformation should immediately be suspect as descriptions of human communication, because they try and establish that there is this other thing that we're trying to get back to, this golden age of pure information, which is entirely neutral and shared. But also, if you use the word, you're immediately telling anybody who was the slightest bit open to even considering the content of the misinformation that they are at best gullible and at worst malign. The stupid, ignorant or evil, I think, is the phrase that's often used. And coming at this from the perspective of actually wanting to engage in debate online as well as everywhere else, the first thing I would say was, if you want to change somebody's mind, then you have to start with them and with the assumption that they are a rational being and that they have reasons for believing whatever it is they believe or are open to believing, and engage with them on that level. So as soon as you've labelled something misinformation, you've basically told them that this is an unreasonable thing to even entertain believing, and that what they should do is fall in line with you and what you think is true or certain. So to pick up on what's the problem with online discussion, debate, where online disagreements go wrong, and in fact to pick up on some of the things that Nico was just saying, the online disagreements are often polarised and hostile, and we lack a shared ground on which to disagree. That is partly factual, hence is this information or misinformation division, but also partly in terms of simply what are the rules of engagement here? What do we think are reasonable ways to engage with people that you disagree with? Is there a common language? So it's not only do we have a shared picture of what the world is actually like, do we have a shared picture of how we should disagree with each other and how we should hash out arguments, and we often don't. And this is this is the polarization that has already been mentioned, which is absolutely not helped by labelling what you disagree with as misinformation. That just exacerbates polarization. But again, and picking up on the things that have already been said, this polarization precedes social media. It wasn't invented by social media. The polarization was already happening. And I'd like actually to talk a little bit about some very good research by Professor Chris Bale at Duke University, who runs a thing called the Polarization Lab, where he woke up very surprised in 2016 because Trump had been elected, and thought, well, that's a surprise. Nobody I knew or followed on social media was going to vote for Trump. And with admirable intellectual humility, he said, well, I must have been doing something wrong then, because clearly millions of people did vote for him. So he went out with first of all, with the working assumption that the problem was echo chambers, and did some research. And then when COVID happened and people went very online, saw an opportunity to do some research with volunteers, found people with relatively polarised political views, not necessarily extreme, and exposed them to opposing views online. And contrary to what he expected, which is that their echo chambers would be opened up and they would start to see each other's point of view more, he found they entrenched more. They actually became more polarised in the sense that he calls false polarisation, which is that they didn't necessarily change their views all that much, but their perception of the other side hardens, that they felt the other side was more extreme than they were, in fact, and that the other side was more hostile to them than they were. And this was mutual, this was on both sides. and also affective polarization, which is their feelings towards the other side hardened up. And he realized that what happens when you go online is not that you're trying to have a conversation, you're trying to establish your own identity and your political identity and your group identity, and so you perceive disagreement as an attack. And so, in fact, trying to expose people to other views without addressing that was not going to do anything at all. So this is why I think looking at the nature of social media is not really helpful, because the nature of social media responds to these trends, which again precedes social media, the perception across political divides, and it's definitely more extreme in the US, but it's also present here. The idea, for example, that you don't want to be friends with someone who politically disagrees with you is getting stronger and stronger, or the idea that you wouldn't want a child of yours marrying across a political divide is getting stronger and stronger. I remember being struck after 2016 that both Leave and Remain voters said that they wouldn't. I think about half of the Leave voters said they wouldn't want a child of theirs marrying a Remain voter, and about 70% of the Remain voters said they wouldn't want their child marrying the Leave voter, which is often seems to be the case, that the supposedly more liberal side of a divide is actually much more emotionally hostile to any kind of family links. So, I mean, to sum up really, and to disappointingly perhaps agree with the two previous speakers, these are problems. It's not that it's not a problem, but they're problems that don't originate in the nature of online interaction. And to address them through addressing the technology and the nature of online interaction and the content of online interaction would only exacerbate the problems, because the lack of trust in expertise, in authority, in institutions certainly precedes social media and the technology. And the polarization across political divides also precedes the technology. And again, just to echo what's already been said, trying to enforce what is true and what's untrue, what's information and what's misinformation, would only exacerbate that sense of distrust of authority and polarization. And finally, I'd just like to end with the people in good faith trying to police misinformation should remember Cromwell's law, which is, I beseech you, my lords, in the bowels of Christ, to consider the possibility that you may be wrong.